Welcome back. Welcome back to the passenger terminal. And you were guided in by the wonderful music by Stefan Geusebroek and Julia Rusanowski. They played Bésame Mucho, and they played a part of Schubert called Ständchen. And of course, they really would deserve a standing ovation, a loud applause by a big crowd. But we only have so very little people here, but I'll still ask them to do so. Please, round of applause for the musicians. That was quite good. They're all men here. We have a few people here, but what you can see is that there are, of course, camera people in front of me, and the sound and direction, and everybody working on the Zoom connection. So some people here, not completely lonely. And of course, I have my fellow host with me. Jean, are you there? Yes, you are.
I'm indeed, absolutely. Looking forward to the next session.
Yes, me too. And welcome to all of you. And if you are here for the first time, well, please know that we've been discussing lots of interesting stuff, but you're very welcome to join us from now on. Jean, Twitter has been quite active.
Absolutely, it's been fantastic. We've had a really good feedback. People have been tweeting an awful lot during the last 2 days. I think we can even put up a slide with some of the.
It would be great to see what people.
That people posted.
Okay.
But just to give you an idea, until today we had 2,157 tweets.
Wow, that's
Those
good.
tweets got 7,909,000 impressions. So that's people clicking on the tweets, seeing the tweets.
The activity.
So we have a number of people in this room. We have 6 people speaking here, but we're really reaching a very, very big audience.
Lovely.
Through Twitter as well now.
Yes, so you said 2,075 tweets, something like that?
2,157.
175. So let's aim for 4,000 today.
That sounds like a good aim.
So let's make that work. That would be great. The hashtag is, and you can see it right now, hashtag 30AEC. Quite easy. So lovely. And what do the tweets say? I see a lady here. Maybe we can show it again.
Absolutely. If you go to the first slide back again.
Oh yeah,
because I think it's really important. Like one of the key messages that people were particularly moved by was the session that we had at lunchtime, which was the kind of European working group. So it's all the people living with dementia talking about how the disease has impacted them. And so a lot of people have been tweeting about that.
Yes.
And this is just one example. This is Carol Hargreaves from Scotland, who talked about that and shared how difficult a time it was for her.
Yeah.
But we also touched on the stigma and social isolation that we talked about also earlier. And somebody put forward a kind of quote from Terry Pratchett, the really famous author. And I think it's really worthwhile thinking about that, because he said, it seems that when you have cancer, you are a brave battler against the disease. But when you have Alzheimer's, you are an old fart.
Yes.
That's not me saying that. That was Terry Pratchett saying that. And that's how people see you, and it makes you feel quite alone. And it responds a bit to the discussion and question that you had this morning. How is this disease different, and how is stigma really an issue for people with dementia?
Yes, and it's still there. So people make fun of you when you have dementia, and they don't do that when you have cancer, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's impressive. Nice selfies here. We see
some other
smiling people.
We have this morning we talked about the trend of people talking about their cats and dogs that we're watching. This time it's people actually showing the posters that they are presenting and taking selfies of them and their posters. Also some really nice feedback. For example, one person, Simone Felding, who talks that this was an incredible experience and unbelievable how much you can learn while sitting in your living room. And then also other people just sharing the kind of very interesting research that they are sharing. So lots of interaction, and as you said,
and big smiles.
4,000 tweets before today is over.
Exactly. I think we can manage that, and I love the smiles in it. But you can show us anything you want, right? So let's see. What do you think that people did achieve already, or what did they do? I think that we can ask them a question about that.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we wanted to ask our audience again is, well, we had some kind of aims with our kind of platform, and we wanted to see whether people have actually used the platform in the way that we wanted them to use it. So have you been a part of the plenary sessions? Have you watched some of the parallel sessions?
Exactly.
Did you check all the posters, the quick oral presentations? Did you visit our exhibitors? Were you able to network with other people?
Yeah.
And the poll is open, and do let us know what you have done and how you have experienced the conference so far.
Yeah, I love that. Of course, a lot of people attended the plenary sessions, which is a good idea because you and me are here, right, Jean?
Absolutely, that must be one reason people turn up.
But we're all almost outvoted by the parallel sessions, so they have been quite interesting as well. As I learned in the comments in the app. Oh, maybe somebody can help me here with the app that's falling out. But I see. But they said that the awareness session was really great. You
Absolutely. So there's some really fantastic parallel sessions that people could listen to.
Yeah.
But good to see like what people have been looking at, and you can see the results changing over time as people are voting. But there's also aspects, maybe the kind of exhibitors and the kind of virtual booth that organizations have. There's a lot of very interesting information out there. So if you haven't done that, please go and check that as well.
Yeah,
and also the possibility you can connect to other conference attendees. So if you find somebody, a speaker that you found particularly interesting,
yes,
drop them a message, send them information. The app is really meant to allow you to interact with people. So hopefully you'll be able to do that.
How can they do that? How can they reach out to a speaker? Because I hear only 23% has connected to other attendees, which is not enough, I think. Don't you?
It's not that much. Absolutely, I agree that we should do more of that. And the simple way is doing that is if you found a speaker, for example, that you found particularly interesting, just check on their name and you can just send them a message. You can even see whether you can organize a face-to-face meeting with that person because you have specific issues. All of that is possible. So make the most of the possibilities that you have to meet of course, people from other countries.
Yeah, we have the chat option at the platform, the conference IO, and they can use that, which is also very interactive. Many people are saying some very beautiful music, again, appreciate it, and that there's energy and interaction and great speakers here. Let me see. And somebody joined the clapping for the musicians at home. Thanks so much. They deserve that round of applause. So this is also interacting and connecting. So please use that app. We really love it, and we will make sure that we read everything.
From home, right?
What? Sorry?
And clap from home.
Clap. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Please, let's do that every time when they play, because they're here all the time, and then they deserve it. You're completely right. All right, Jean, let's proceed with the rest of the program. We have something important to talk about, which is one of your important aims, and that is building dementia-inclusive societies. So you invited some interesting guests to talk about that and to speak with the voice of people with dementia everywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a very different session to the one that we had this morning, because like this morning we focused on clinical issues, on medical issues, around diagnosis and clinical management. This time is really around how to make sure that the people that we are representing, how to make sure that they are properly involved in the research that we're carrying out, in the services that we develop, in hospitals. You'll hear more about that as well, but also how they can be full citizens within our societies and not disregarded or left on their own. So this is a very, very strong message that will hopefully come out of this plenary session.
Yes, we will work in this way. There will be a presentation of around 15 minutes per person, and then afterwards we will ask you, the audience, a question, a poll, and then we will discuss that for just a little. You can ask your questions during the presentations all the time, and we will make sure that we read them. And afterwards, when all the 4 presenters have presented, we will be back with them, and we will ask them the questions, as many as we can. So please feel free. Your comments, your reactions, your questions, everything, just make sure that you put that in the app, and we will come back to you with that. So I'd say let's start. Our first guest is Dianne GOVE. What's she gonna present, Jean?
So Dianne is, well, she has been the director for projects for Alzheimer Europe, and she's been working with me since 1996. And we have a long time that we have worked together. Within the organization, she really deals with a lot of the kind of ethical work that our organization is really known for. And the European Working Group of People with Dementia that I already mentioned, she and a colleague of hers are really moderating and supporting that group.
Before we go to her, you want to ask the audience a question, or you want to have a poll about the involvement of the public, right? Yeah.
We wanted to see is how familiar people are already with this kind of concept of public involvement in research. So you can vote on that, and basically, is this something that you're already familiar with? Is it something that you would like to know more about? Or is it something that actually you have already done either as a researcher or as a participant, as either a patient or carer?
What is your experience of public involvement in research projects? And so you named the options already, so give them a little time just to vote. Maybe you would like to learn more, or you have no experience at all whatsoever possible, or you have been involved, or you have been involved with people with dementia. So I think people are voting.
But it also gives you an idea that this is a very special conference, because normally if you ask a conference, have you any experience of involving people with dementia in research, you would probably very often hear that, no, we haven't actually done that much. But at our conference, 51%, so over half of the people say, yes, we have already
51%. Yes, is it possible to see the results? Or no? No. Okay, so can you tell us the results, please?
So the results is like 53% have said that they have already involved people with dementia in research. 23% would like to know more about that. Only 15% say that they have no experience whatsoever in public involvement. And then the rest say that they have been involved in that as either a person with dementia or carer. So again, around 15%. So that's a nice way of showing that this is something that Dianne is now going to talk about, is something that a lot of people will be already familiar with, at least at our conference.
All right. Her session is pre-recorded, but in the end, she will be here live on Zoom. All right.
Absolutely. We can. Let's listen to her.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about involving people with dementia in research in the context of public involvement, drawing on the work of the European Working Group of People with Dementia. Alzheimer Europe has developed this approach to public involvement over the years through experience, observation, and listening to the needs and wishes of the group, and taking into account the perspectives of researchers. First of all, I'd like to clarify what we mean by public involvement. Public involvement is about involving people with dementia throughout the whole research process as advisors, carrying out research together with people rather than on or for them. So in this context, the people doing the research are people with dementia, and they're not research participants, and they're not merely being informed about research. The rationale for public involvement can be roughly divided into two main approaches. The first emphasizes ethical, social, and political concerns. Public involvement is portrayed as an end in itself, linking involvement to democracy, democratic decision-making, public accountability, legitimization, and transparency. To people having rights, so a right to voice, a right to be involved in research relevant to one's own condition, and to the ethical principles of justice and fairness. In the second approach, public involvement is perceived as a means to an end, linked to attempts to improve the quality, relevance, and/or the utility of research from both a researcher and a user perspective. And it can be considered as instrumental in providing knowledge that might otherwise be missing and that would benefit the research process. People with dementia can highlight issues and ask questions about things that researchers have perhaps not considered, draw attention to issues that would be problematic for people with dementia participating in research, and sometimes challenging procedures and practices which seem discriminatory and inappropriate. But both of these approaches reflect key goals of our organisation and what different members of the European Working Group of People with Dementia have described as being important to them. Early on, Alzheimer Europe relied on advice and involvement from two people, namely the late Peter Ashley and James McKillop, And we're very grateful for the work that they did, for showing us it was possible and essential to work together with people with dementia. As such, they were the forerunners of the current working group. And then in 2012, we set up the European Working Group of People with Dementia with Helga Rohrer as the first chair, and she was remarkable in giving direction to this entirely new group. The conditions for being in the group are to have dementia, to be able to follow discussions in English and to speak English if necessary with support, and there's no age limit, and people with any form of dementia can be members. Quarterly face-to-face meetings are normally held over a 3-day period, and we're currently working out how best to function with the constraints of the coronavirus pandemic. Each year, the group works on a different topic, and this year that topic just happened to be the accessibility of meetings and events. And the group will have a report at the end of this year with a special focus on Zoom meetings. On this slide, you can see the names of different research projects on the left and the main types of public involvement on the right. And a wide range of methods and approaches have been used, including discussion, written commentaries, brainstorming, working on vignettes, sorting, rating and ranking activities, and individual work. Clearly, these activities can be pretty demanding. They call on skills that some people don't typically use in their everyday lives. Getting to and participating in meetings rely to some extent on various capacities, such as memory, communication, abstract thinking, planning, and orientation, all of which tend to be affected by dementia. A key challenge is to ensure that we don't exclude some people from contributing towards research through public involvement, and this was particularly difficult in virtual meetings when some countries and areas were in lockdown and members of the group didn't have their supporters by their side. So this brings me to the issue of being inclusive. So I'm now going to look at levels and kinds of involvement, collaborative work, promoting diversity, and about training. This diagram provides an overview of different levels of involvement along a continuum, ranging from a one-off involvement in a particular task, through involvement at several or every stage of the research process, up to involvement as a member of the research team. Overall, the goal is for people with dementia to be involved throughout the whole research process, from the earliest stage, even during project proposals, right through to the end of the project, but not necessarily the same people throughout. It shouldn't be assumed that everyone is capable of or interested in the same kind or level of involvement. And last year, quite spontaneously, some members of the European Working Group expressed an interest in a greater involvement in a particular study. And this led to the creation of a core group, in addition to the general group, whose members were ready to intervene more often and at shorter notice. And this enabled the researchers to move forward more rapidly with a particular issue. Some people work best in groups where they can bounce ideas off each other, elaborate points and debate various issues. And we emphasize the importance of capturing the views and experience in the group, and that differences of opinion are good. Other people prefer to contribute in writing, and this gives them more time to reflect and to provide more detailed responses. With the help of the different members of the group itself, we work out together with external researchers how to maximize each person's ability to contribute towards PI work. The issue of power is often raised in relation to public involvement, with frequent references to Arnstein's ladder of involvement, whereby certain types and levels of involvement are considered relatively worthless and others optimal based on the perceived levels of power in relation to decision making. In the European Working Group, there is a clear desire to have a real impact on dementia research, to be involved throughout the whole process, and to influence decision making, whilst also empowering researchers to do good research by sharing with them their unique insight into dementia. And with these goals as the driving force and the motivation for public involvement work, the group is not preoccupied with who calls the shots when sessions are organised or who has the last word. It's not about winning or losing. Inclusion is not a battle for power, but a matter of collaboration and valuing each person's contribution, whatever that might be. Members of the European Working Group recognise various constraints linked to the research process. So, for example, with regard to ethics approval, delays with recruitment, and the need for input from researchers in different countries working together, all of which affect when their involvement would be most beneficial. Researchers recognise the effort that people with dementia make in travelling sometimes hundreds of kilometres, working intensively over 3 days, and for many in a foreign language. So inclusion involves respect for each other's constraints, clarity about each other's roles, and a process of mutual adaptation. Public involvement may be a means to an end in some respects, but people with dementia themselves are not tools to be picked up and dropped along the way. Collaboration needs to be continuous, and it's important for inclusion that people with dementia feel part of the whole research process. So we always encourage researchers to give members of the European Working Group regular feedback on how their input has been fed into the research process and impact that it's had. There are several factors which may make it more difficult and hence less likely for some people to contribute to PI than others. An understanding of the difference and relationship between equality and equity is important in this respect. An approach based on equality involves treating everybody in the same way without taking into account differences between people which may be inherent, linked to circumstances, or structurally determined. In the context of public involvement, this might involve, for example, discussing highly technical documents or holding meetings in places that are difficult for some people to reach, or during religious celebrations. So these are examples of equality. Everyone is welcome to attend, but may actually be unfair and not conducive to attracting and involving a diverse set of people. Equity is not about simply providing everyone with the same opportunities, but about ensuring fairness and equality in outcomes. Reasonable adjustments and adaptations must be made to promote inclusion in a similar way to the concept of reasonable accommodation in relation to disability. So striving for an inclusive approach and the promotion of diversity shouldn't be confused with the quest for a representative sample. People with dementia doing PI work are not research participants. They don't provide data and they don't need to be representative. Their involvement shouldn't therefore be described in terms of representativeness in the statistical sense. It can, however, be helpful to involve several people with dementia so as to benefit from different perspectives and experiences of dementia, but the aim shouldn't be for their perspectives and experience to be generalised to the wider population. The use of terminology related to participation in research may contribute towards confusion and lack of clarity about the role and value of public involvement in research. It can interfere with the goal of attracting people with dementia from various minority groups who might feel that they cannot speak on behalf of people with dementia in general. Every 2 years, some members of the European Working Group with people with dementia leave, others stay on, and new people join. So the group's constantly changing, and we're continuously trying to make public involvement work more inclusive, but we still need to work with our member associations to encourage a broad range of people, including people from minority ethnic groups, for example, to be involved. One of the key aims of public involvement for researchers is to benefit from the experience and insight that people with dementia have in relation to the research topic and the conduct of their study. The benefits of training are often described in terms of ensuring that people with dementia can exchange and engage with professional researchers on a level playing field. But often there's an implicit assumption that people with dementia need to be brought up to the level of the researchers. Granted, most researchers have spent several years studying, and a lot of people with dementia wouldn't have that same knowledge, but it should also be recognised that many researchers have little understanding of what it's like to live with dementia and how to render their topic accessible to people with dementia. Our experience of public involvement with the European Working Group has shown that researchers can render their topic for which they need input accessible to people with dementia without requiring that the latter be trained. Another fairly extreme approach is to consider training as threatening authentic input from people with dementia. Some researchers suggest that lay people may over time become so highly informed that they identify with the researchers to the extent that they become distanced from what would normally have been their own viewpoint, or that they lose sight of the patient perspective for those who feel that they should be representing the views of other people, which is not our view. So there are different ways of looking at the quest for a level playing field, and some would argue that people with dementia need to be brought up to the top end of the pitch, thereby underestimating the need for researchers to adapt to their needs and abilities. And others would argue that this would result in them losing their valuable insight into the experience of dementia by identifying too closely with researchers and research. And what about the people with dementia themselves? If public involvement is presented as something for which training is necessary, this may give the wrong message to people who might otherwise be interested in it, and it may be perceived as indicating that public involvement is only for highly educated people or for people who are good at and willing to study. People who don't fall into that category may feel discouraged or disempowered. Others might, of course, be interested in having some training on a particular issue, but the thing is that training should not be a necessary criterion for public involvement work. It would be helpful to reframe training so as to focus on the issue of providing support, which might include providing accessible information and helping people to develop skills that they might find helpful for public involvement. And we need to recognise that public involvement provides an opportunity for researchers to learn from people with dementia, and that the first step in that learning is to render issues and materials accessible to people who have cognitive and other impairments typically associated with dementia. In terms of knowledge and experience that are valuable for dementia research, people with dementia and researchers each have their strengths and need to be able to meet in the centre circle and gradually expand that circle. So let's reach out, meet halfway, adapt to and learn from each other and from mistakes, respect and value each other's contribution, and make sure that public involvement is not only valuable to research and society, but also accessible, rewarding, and enjoyable for everybody. So many thanks to the European Working Group of People with Dementia, to their supporters and the researchers for all the work that they do to ensure inclusive and good quality research. And thank you to you all, to the audience, for your attention. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Dianne. We will talk to you just a little later. Oh, Jean, I saw all these pictures. I saw people sitting close by to each other. Seems like a long time ago.
A long time, but a nice time.
Yeah, way better.
We'll get back to that time as well.
Yes, we will. We will. We have to believe in that, right? So that was lovely. But you wanted to go back to the results of the first question, right? So maybe we can see that. Why did you want to go back to the first question where you asked about people's experience of their public involvement?
Yeah, so that's slide 6. If you could just show that very briefly, which just gives you an idea, because I think I just showed the numbers or set the numbers, but it might be nicer for people to actually see the results.
Yes.
There you can really see that the overwhelming majority of people really have first-hand experience in involving people with dementia in research. Those that don't, so 28% actually want to get more information, but then also a number of people, so 9% were actually involved themselves as people with dementia or carers, and then only 12% said that so far they have no experience of public involvement. I think that's a pretty good indication of who attends our conferences.
And how would you explain the 12%? Because, of course, you would suspect that people have some experience.
It could also be that some of the people that are attending here are not necessarily involved themselves in research. So if they're not involved in research or academic papers, they may not have that kind of first-hand experience. Also, people from Alzheimer's organizations, they may not necessarily think about some of the work that they do as public involvement. So that could explain the 12%.
Yeah, maybe. So now we have another question to ask our viewers. Paul, please, if you will take a look at that, because we want to know a little more about you. What statement best describes your opinion of public involvement in research?
So this is not their experience, but really what are their views on these issues?
This is how they feel.
Slide 7, and again, it's some interesting results that you're going to.
And you just have to pick one that feels most like your own opinion in this, right?
So they have the options of saying, well, it is just an obligation to get ethics approval and funding, and you can see that it's only about 1% of people who said that was the case. Most people agreed that 54% said that it is essential for sound methodology and good results. 40% said that it is quite important for successful research. And there's still some people who feel that it is just an unnecessary burden for researchers. I think if you ask this same question at a conference where there's basic scientists or other more clinical researchers that would be involved, the kind of results would have been maybe slightly different, whereas the kind of researchers that we have are involved in social research, in psychosocial research. Obviously, their views of the importance of involving people with dementia is much stronger.
To me, the difference between essential and quite important is interesting. What's that? What do you think might make them switch over to essential or to just quite important?
I think if they had listened to Dianne's presentation, they would have heard how
I hope they did.
Involving them really makes a difference to the research results. You do better research if you involve people with dementia from the beginning, rather than just involving them when you are disseminating information at the very end of a project.
Oh, yes, but I think that they heard the presentation. I hope so. But we will talk a little more with Dianne about this later, I suggest. In the end, when we have listened to all the different presentations. So thank you so far for your comments. And we would now like to talk about hospitals, how to make hospitals more dementia-friendly, right? We have Sabine JANSEN, and I think that she will be here now. So maybe we can say hello to Sabine. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Where are you now?
Nice to be here.
Yes.
I'm in Berlin.
Where? Sorry?
In Berlin, in Germany.
In Berlin, Germany, yes, because you are, of course, Executive Director for the German Alzheimer's Association, right?
Right.
Okay, good. And you will present us some recommendations from your campaign of the association to make hospitals more dementia-friendly, which is also quite a society in itself. So go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this invitation. Maybe 2 sentences. Our organization is an umbrella organization. We have 136 member organizations all over Germany, and it's run mainly by family caregivers. But we also have, similar to the European Working Group, advisory board living with dementia. That's maybe important to have it in the background. When I was working on this speech, I was thinking about this promoting dementia-inclusive hospitals. That was given, this task was given me by Alzheimer Europe, and I think we are still far away from a dementia-inclusive hospital, like it was defined also from Dianne before. So maybe our way the last 12 years was more promoting dementia-friendly hospitals, and I will show you what we have done the last years. Next slide, please. Being in hospitals is very unpleasant for everybody. I think usually you are in the hospital because you feel bad, you have pain. That's a very, the surrounding is unknown by everybody. You need support, but there's nobody. The family is not around. The staff has no time. They are running all the time. And even the language is sometimes very strange to understand if you have this medical diagnosis language, for instance. And you can imagine that's even worse if you are a person with dementia. Next slide, please. The German Alzheimer Association run a helpline since 2002, and we have a lot of complaints, especially from caregivers. And I just brought 3 quotes from the family caregivers, like, how can a person with dementia can come to a toilet that is far away from a way with plenty of empty beds? That was a quote, and you can imagine orientation is a very big problem in hospitals. Or another quote of a family person was, my mother is in hospital because of her diabetes. With her dementia symptoms, she's disturbing everybody. staff wishes to get rid of her. So the caregivers are sometimes very desperate because they see the reaction that they've faced in their hospitals. Or another quote is, "We as a family caregivers are ready to support. We know about the person with dementia and the individual characteristics, but we need partner in the hospital to go the way together." So usually the person with dementia is accompanied by a family caregiver, and then they tell a lot to the staff, and then the staff is changing and information gets lost. And that's even worse in the changing times we have today with the COVID-19 situations where nobody is allowed to go to the hospitals. And that's a very difficult time. Next slide, please. Especially this last problem I just mentioned brought us to an idea, because we are self-help organizations, and so we developed a kind of information sheet in 2008 already, where some elements of individual characteristics could be written in this sheet by the caregivers, and then they could give it to the hospital so the information get not lost anymore. So that's a very practical thing what we have developed. And some of the hospitals nowadays, they have put this sheets in their documentation in the hospitals. A very, very small step, but when we heard this problems, we thought we have to do something. Next slide, please. And also on our member organizations, they set up some projects on the local level, but also on the level of the federal states. And I've brought two examples. Here's one example of the federal state in Niedersachsen, that's more in the north of Germany. And they did a cooperation with some different organizations, medical organizations, but also the municipality organizations, and they developed two curricula to improve the education of staff in the hospitals. And they tried to establish a special dementia agent this person should be responsible for the hospitals, for all departments, for everything has to do with dementia, because usually the people with dementia, they are not on one special unit, but they are on the unit for more, for different diseases. And they set up this curricula, they evaluated with the medical university, they sent it to all nursing schools, to hospitals, and they tried to improve the education of staff. And also they developed a concept for daycare in hospital, because one of the main problems in hospitals is that people with dementia, they have nothing to do, there's nobody around them. And so it's very important that they have somebody to accompany them through the day. Next slide, please. Another project was done in Bavaria. Our colleagues in Bavaria, they started a cooperation with the Bavarian Hospital Association, and you can see that was already in 2010, lasted to 2017. The problem is not solved yet in every hospital, of course, but that was a cooperation about this time. And they started with some information events about dementia in hospitals. And then they started also education programs for the staff, and not on special geriatric departments, but also, for instance, on the places where emergency cases come to the hospital. And also they educated volunteers to send them in hospitals to support the medical staff in the hospitals. Next slide, please. The German Alzheimer Association also ran a small research program. And in 2010, we supported one project about research in hospitals. And Sabine Kirchen-Peters, she analyzed the barriers that hinder the implementation of dementia-inclusive concept in hospitals. So there are good concepts, but they are not known everywhere. And there's only like happy isles in the world of hospitals. And she defined some barriers. One way on an individual level, like underestimation of the problem. The hospital said they did not see that's a big problem. They didn't know anything about the figures. There was a communication between the management on one side, on the staff who mentioned the problems on the other side. she defines that suppression of own fears may cause to this barriers, the fear of age or the need of care, and also the self-concept of medicine. That's very controversial, like to the concept of care, for instance, especially in, I think, in university hospitals. It's very different, the concepts. Next slide, please. Other barriers were more institutional and general. For instance, the diagnosis is not known. If the people come to the admission, it's maybe everything was fine at home, but if you come to other surrounding and people cannot orient, they don't have their usual daily living. Dementia is known firstly. Dementia-inclusive concept are not known, so they don't know what to do. Hospitals have other interesting themes, maybe like hygiene or COVID-19 at the moment. Hospitals are very slow in changing routines. That's also a barrier. Clinics are very specialized. Dementia is often as a second diagnosis. That's not the reason of the people coming to the hospitals. And also we have a very big economic pressure in hospitals, because in Germany we have the DRG system, means that hospitals get a special amount of money for a special disease and not money for the days people stay in hospital. Next slide, please. Nowadays we have some figures that makes very obviously the problem. We have 1.6 million people with dementia in Germany. 83 million people live in Germany. And nowadays we know from a study which was done in 2016 by Professor Schäufele and Dr. Bickel in Mannheim and Munich, that if you look to the patients in the age over 65, we have nearly 40% of patients in hospitals with cognitive impairments. And if you look to dementia, it's nearly 20%. That's a very big number. And nowadays, nobody can say that's a small problem. So even the management now knows that there's something to do. And if you look to the absolute number, so Bickel said that 23,000 patients with dementia are in hospitals every day. So that's a very, very big number. Next slide, please. We were very happy that also this research about the figures was founded by the Robert Bosch Foundation, which is a very big foundation in Germany. They have also set up a program, People with Dementia in Hospitals, in the last years. It's ended now. And so they supported different hospitals who try to change in special aspects, for instance, in the improvement of knowledge about dementia and delia, with the aim of better recognition and treatment of dementia in the hospitals. They supported hospitals to build up special units where people with dementia could depart of the diagnosis like diabetes or maybe broken hip or something like that. So they came to a special unit with daycare facilities, volunteers maybe working with people with dementia. They started new structures to involve family cares better in the hospitals. They tried to change the design of environment in hospitals, maybe with different light concepts, color concepts, and so on. And they tried to cooperate with other institutions who have more knowledge about dementia. And all these results of this program of the Robert Bosch Foundation was published in a guideline. Unfortunately, it's only in German language. You can download it on the internet. It's called Praxisleitfaden zum Aufbau demenzsensibler Krankenhäuser in German. So it's a practical guideline. Next slide, please. And nowadays, we are very happy to have the German National Dementia Strategy that was launched in summer this year. And we have worked in 4 fields of action. And the third field is the improvement of the medical and care system. And there's also one chapter about dementia-inclusive hospitals. And it includes measures like better qualification of staff, better coping with delia situations, dementia-friendly pathways of treatment, and also changes in environment in the hospitals that are only some of the measures that are written down in our national dementia strategy. So we hope that that will change the situation also. Next slide, please. So if I look back from the past to the future, we started 2008 with first initiatives to improve the situation. At that time, also until 2010, problem in most hospitals was not seen, but we already have had grassroots projects. In 2017, we had the first cooperation with the German Hospital Association and producing a first leaflet for caregivers with information what will happen in the hospitals, what can be done, how can you support. And that was a very big step for us because it's even more acceptance in the hospitals if it comes from our own umbrella organization, not from a family care association. And now we are very happy with the National Dementia Strategy, and hopefully we'll have more steps for structural changes, not only for grassroots projects and at that places where we have very good people, but maybe to come more in other situations all over Germany. And there's still a lot to do in hospitals to get even maybe dementia-inclusive and not only dementia-friendly. Next slide, and that's my end. Thank you.
Yes. That's your last slide, all right. Thank you so much. We are very curious to find out what the experience of the participants is, so we want to ask them a question. What do you think are the keys to improve the experience of people with dementia in hospitals? So the poll's been out for a while now, but maybe you can give your vote if you have listened to her. So what is important? Dedicated admittance procedures or design changes to make them more comfortable? Or staff training? Well, you can see in the results that that is very important to the participants so far. Dedicated units for people with dementia, orientation help within hospitals, or something else, but we know we don't have that category, yeah. So, staff training on dementia. Maybe is Sabine still there? Sabine, yes, because we had a reaction here where somebody said in Hampshire we do have trained staff on people with dementia, but people are not able to find them because sometimes patients are in different wards and people don't know where to find the trained staff. So it's hard to organize. What would your solution be or your suggestion?
I think the big aim should be to have trained staff in every ward.
Yeah.
So that's the best. But
everybody should know.
They have created a special unit, units where the trained staff is. And I think very important is to have trained staff in emergency units when people arrive at the hospitals. And maybe the idea of dementia agents is also a good idea. If you have a special person who supports the other staff persons in the hospitals, and where you can ask somebody who has very good knowledge. That's maybe also very helpful for other persons. We know that hospitals have a lot of themes to deal with.
Yeah, and you call that agents. It's like this.
Yeah, I don't know the exact translation.
That's an idea. Yeah,
we would call it different.
It must be easy to find them.
The name is not important.
No, the name is not important.
What they are doing is very important.
It is. The name is not important, but it's very important that people can find these people who know more. And also, but in first aid, they have to be able to recognize who is suffering from dementia. Okay, so Jean, did you listen? Of course you did. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, I found the kind of results of the poll really interesting because 98% say that staff training is the most important thing.
Overwhelming.
It's something that we've learned in so many of the kind of aspects when it comes to dementia care. It's not about what you put on the walls or how you organize it. It's the staff that will really make a difference to the kind of experience of people with dementia whether it's in a hospital, whether it's a nursing home, whether it's in daycare, or whether it's in shops, whether it's in society. So
everywhere.
Really that training makes a huge difference.
And the people make the difference, so that's kind of hopeful. Yes, is it? Well, thank you so much, Sabine, and we'll be back with you after all the presentations, and then we will have more questions. And yes, we would like that translation of the German guideline for people in hospital with dementia. Next guest, Jean, is Jacqueline HOOGENDAM.
So Jacqueline HOOGENDAM, let's try and pronounce it also the proper Dutch way.
Yeah, you're good. Say it again, please.
HOOGENDAM.
Yes, lovely.
Oh.
It's a soft G, but that's nice. That's okay.
Goedemiddag, Jacqueline.
Well
She's
done.
a representative of the Dutch Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sport. She also represents the Netherlands in a whole range of international and European bodies, such as the European Governmental Group of Experts on Dementia, the World Dementia Council, and she also sits on the JPND.
Yeah.
But the Netherlands has also been really one of the countries that has been leading when it comes to dementia strategies and dementia-friendly initiatives. And what we will be listening to, and it's a pre-recorded presentation, is really the experience of the Netherlands in those dementia-friendly communities and initiatives, but also they are already thinking of dementia-friendliness 2.0, so they are ahead of some countries which haven't even started that kind of process. So good to hear from her, yes.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to speak here today and tell you about the dementia-friendly approach in the Netherlands. Persons with dementia matter. For the past 6 years, our National Alzheimer organization worked together with PGGM, a private company, and the Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sport on dementia-friendliness in the Netherlands. It's called Samen dementie-vriendelijk, which translates in something like together, dementia-friendly. It is a successful program. It acquired over 370,000 dementia friends by now, way over our original goals of 325,000 friends by the end of the year. Within the program, we also developed 12 different types of training for professional, staff in shops, public transport, hairdressers, etc. I won't go over the whole list. We encourage businesses and municipalities to become more dementia friendly. This enables persons with dementia to remain more independent. A logical step, then, is towards empowerment, and instead of compensating for disabilities, to facilitate the use of abilities, because persons with dementia matter. On this year's World Alzheimer's Day, our Minister of Health, Hugo de Jonge, launched the National Dementia Strategy 2021-2030. Allow me to take a small sidestep. The mission of this strategy is persons with dementia and those close to them are worthy members of society and deserve good support and care. We enable scientific research into prevention, treatment, and cure of dementia. The strategy has 3 main themes: a world without dementia, enabling pioneering research on a national and international level to treat, cure, and prevent dementia. And the ultimate goal is that no one has dementia. But for the time being, we have to face the fact that a growing number of people get dementia, leading to the second theme of our national strategy, which is tailor-made support when living with dementia. Personalized support and care in accordance with our recently reviewed dementia care standard. High-quality support and care as wished and needed by a person with dementia and those close to him or her, focusing on their abilities because persons with dementia matter. Our third theme, worthy members of society, enabling them to use their abilities instead of only compensating for disabilities. The strategy also has 4 overarching themes: innovation, young onset dementia, international activities, and of course, communication. The full text of the strategy in English is soon available on the website of the Ministry of Health. Returning to the topic of my presentation, dementia-friendly in the Netherlands, and tell you about the future, which is dementia-friendly 2.0. There's still need for traditional dementia friends, assisting persons with dementia when they need some help, but we built on this. Dementia-friendly 2.0 is about the empowerment of persons with dementia. It facilitates persons with dementia to be active with things they like to do, to have meaningful activities. And mind you, except for the students in one picture right on top right, all persons in these photos have dementia. We want them to use their talents. Hence the name of these projects, Dementalent. Set up by one of our best-known Dutch dementia innovators, Ruud Dirksen. And by the way, I would like to thank Ruud for the pictures and the upcoming video he provided. The concept of Dementia-land is seemingly simple, though it requires some extra effort from those working with volunteers with dementia. And now a small remark for those watching this presentation at a later time. Due to privacy reasons, this video is not included in the recording for later viewing. So for those watching this live, a short video on Dementia-land. Yes, it's great to see the beneficial effects for Frans, his wife, and for the football club where Frans works 1 day a week. 25 years ago, Professor Rosemarie Dreus started development of meeting centers for people with dementia in the Netherlands. Persons with dementia and their informal carers are welcome in these centers. In a meeting center, you can meet your peers, get information on dementia-related matters, participate in activities, and go on outings. In the further development of the meeting centers, Professor Dreus started working together with Ruud Dirkse and Dementia-land. Visitors of the meeting centers could do volunteer work in the Dementia-land project. Informal carers receive extra support, the mental codes for support by phone, and STAR training for informal carers and volunteers, leading to the Meeting Center 3.0. And recent research on combining meeting centers and Dementia-land showed great effects. Persons with dementia experience more quality of life. Informal carers for people with dementia feel less burdened, are better able to cope with their tasks. And last but not least, it turned out to be cost-effective and delaying admissions to nursing homes by at least 3 months on average. This cost-effectiveness helped us to convince those in charge of the budgets to make this part of our national strategy. Although the main reason was people with dementia matter. A goal in our National Dementia Strategy is that by 2030, 80% of all persons with dementia have access to a meeting center close to their home and they are offered meaningful activities. We are working on a program to achieve this goal. So it's still a work in progress, but we include, for instance, for those with young onset dementia who still have a paid job at the time of diagnosis. We are in discussion with the Ministry of Social Affairs on encouraging and facilitating employers to continue these employments. We also think there's a role for dementia-friendly businesses, which I talked about earlier in this presentation. For instance, what if a dementia-friendly chain of DIY stores were to enable persons with dementia with a background in building to work in their stores? That would be beneficial, I think, for both of them. There's a lot of work to do, but together with society, we will get there, because persons with dementia matter. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Persons with dementia, they matter. That's obvious. So thank you, Jacqueline. We will talk to you later afterwards. And what you hear is probably wind heavily blowing around the passenger terminal. Do you hear that, John? No, you don't. Maybe some viewers do. In here, it's a loud noise. We really are demonstrating Dutch weather to you. I think that people in the UK can relate to us. Things are breaking down. It sounds like that. But the rain is gone, so it's getting better all the time. The next poll that we want to present and that we ask you to fill in after Jacqueline HOOGENDAM's presentation, it made me think myself, and I thought, my village or community is dementia-friendly. I don't really know. The only thing that I could think of was a dementia-friendly police officer that I saw working. And I felt that he understood what was going on with this person. But for the rest, shops, leisure activities, I don't really know. So I'm curious to find out what people said about this poll. Is your village or town or community dementia-friendly? Dementia-friendly shops can be confusing.
We can go and
leisure.
look at
no such
slide
initiative.
number 9. Yes.
Yeah, yes, we are here. It's showing. No such initiatives exist in my community. That is not good.
That's not what we would have hoped for, but maybe also because Jacqueline is already here, maybe she can also comment on this.
Oh, yes.
Is she
Yeah,
surprised
yeah.
by this finding, or would she have expected these kind of dementia-friendly initiatives
to be
much more widely available? And especially considering the people that are in our conference are people that are very often involved in these type of activities.
Yes, they pay
would
attention.
be aware. Yeah.
What do you think? Hello, Jacqueline. Where are you now?
Good to see you. That's it was quite hard for me to see the results of the poll.
Okay, maybe we can
on my screen.
Well, the people were they were quite low all the time with everything. The people say no such initiatives exist in my community, and we have percentages like 12, 25, 15 for the police. Or the town or community is dementia friendly. Where are you now yourself, Jacqueline?
Yes, I'm in the Netherlands right now.
And in what city?
It's in Woerden. It's near Utrecht. In the middle of country.
Would you consider Woerden to be dementia friendly?
Yes, for a part it is. But it's quite funny that I saw that the local signs directing to the library or the harbor or things like that, they put small icons on it as well, not just the text. And when I talked to the municipality, I said, that's a very good idea. So people with dementia can understand it easier. And they were quite startled, saying, people with dementia, but we meant it for the tourists.
Now there's a suggestion. So what we do for the tourists, we should do for people with dementia.
Yeah, perhaps that's...
We have no tourists coming in anymore, so we can focus on people with dementia now, maybe. No, that's just a joke. But are you surprised by the results, Jean asked?
Well, surprised in a negative sense. I would have hoped that dementia friendliness was more widespread in at least Europe, as I know that quite a lot of countries do have dementia friendly initiatives. Yeah. So it's, well, apparently still very much to do.
More is needed.
To stimulate this. So that's, well, I'm a bit sad now.
A bit sad. There's work to do. Maybe we can turn it around like that. There's maybe work to do.
Encourage Jacqueline there, because she's sad. Maybe like to lift her mood up a bit, because one of the comments also in the question and answers is that a lot of people are looking to the Netherlands as an example for other countries. So we have somebody who talks from the UK. We would really like to have similar initiatives like the one in the Netherlands. I hope that you're feeling a bit better, at least after that.
Do you feel better now, Jacqueline?
Yes, I feel a bit better, and perhaps it's a good subject for our next meeting of the governmental expert group.
Yes, apparently. So that's a good thing too. So now we find out where the needs are, really. So thank you so much, and we will talk to you later after we go to John KEADY, and he's here because we are moving from the whole society to the neighborhood. Today he is here, and we're listening to him in his role of chief investigator of the Neighbourhoods and Dementia Study. Hi, John. Hello. Hi. No, we cannot still not hear you, but that will be fixed, I suppose, if you turn on your microphone. Just, there's a switch. Yes. Good afternoon.
Hello there.
Hello, John.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for the invite and for the time this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. We see you in, I think, a study. Is that correct? In what city or town are you?
I'm in North Wales at the moment, in the UK. So it's a miserable day here as well.
But we get the impression that it always is a horrible day in the UK. Is that the truth?
No, of course it is. It's absolutely true. Yes.
Yes, I see. So you have a wealth of experience in the clinical and in the academic world, and you will share your presentation with us, and people can ask questions in the app, and we will provide them for you later. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm here to talk as the chief investigator of the Neighbourhoods and Dementia Study, and again, a huge thanks. Oh, my slides aren't working. So sorry, my slides have stopped working.
use the cursor arrow, please. Click now. That's the advice. We have all the time. It's fine.
There you go.
There we go.
Things
Yeah.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you for that. I'm speaking as the chief investigator of the Neighbourhood study, but really I'm here on behalf of the entire team. I'm not doing this on my own. There's a number of people to thank very quickly. I'd like to thank Jean-Georges and Alzheimer Europe for this invite. I'd like to thank all the work programme leads whose highlights I will share in this presentation. And I'd like to thank people with dementia who were with us on the 5-year journey. That was the Neighbourhoods and Dementia Study. Some were there at the beginning and some people unfortunately passed away during our time working together. So I just want to honour their memories and basically pay tribute to their contribution to our study. I'd like to share a little bit about where our study started. It started really in 2010 and it started in a bit of unfunded research. I'm a mental health nurse by background and I work at the University of Manchester. And I was a little bit interested as to how people with dementia just access their outdoor spaces. So we did a literature review. It was an unfunded piece of work. It took us about a year. It was published in 2012. And at that time, we found about 18 studies that looked at outdoor spaces that we framed as the neighbourhood. And there was no studies at that time that looked at people with dementia as placemakers. So what engenders a sense of belonging for people with dementia where they live? I was very fortunate because in 2012, David Cameron published the Prime Minister's Challenge on Dementia, the very first one. And on action point 12 of that strategy, it was basically looking towards a new form of funding through the ESRC and the NIHR, which was really about social science research. And it was to try to answer some big questions in dementia. And one of the big questions the strategy looked for was about dementia-friendly communities. So it was very fortuitous. That's where we fitted in. And when we started to apply for the monies, this was the diagram that we presented to try to win those monies, for want of a better word. We looked at the interaction of the neighbourhood between people, spaces, and places. That was our very basic visual diagram to explain what we were trying to do. And we were trying to see, we used Tim Blackman's definition of what a neighbourhood is. And it's basically, it's on the screen there, but it's also a walkable zone of experience. It's what we identify with when we actually go home in the evenings and leave our front doors. What is our neighbourhood? How do we identify it? And how do we interact with it? And from those very basic questions, we were funded for the 5 years for the study, and we started in 2014. So here is basically some of the highlights from the study over the work programmes. Prior to getting to that, I think it's very, very important for me to say that people with dementia were central. I was so moved by Dianne's presentation, but it's always been our values and vision to involve people with dementia at the very beginning of research and really lead research where that's possible to do. And that was a part of the work. It informed our thinking, it informed our strategy, and it informed each of the work programmes, which I'd like to share with you now. So briefly, there was 8 work programmes on the Neighbourhoods and Dementia Study. Work programme 1 was member involvement. That was the name given by people with dementia to their own work programme, basically. That was as co-researchers. That was led by Caroline Swarbrick. Work programme 2 was about using big data to understand the neighbourhood. We used the ELSA database, which is the English Longitudinal Study of Aging. Work programme 3 was about the development of a core outcome set. So what matters most to people with dementia living at home? Work programme 4 was really about everyday life with dementia and getting out and about. Work programme 5 was looking at hospitals and their positioning in neighbourhoods and how basically training and also episodes of care are provided for people with dementia. Work programme 6 was about Dempower. It was led by Ingrid Hellström in Sweden, and Dempower was the name of the app that was developed to support couples to stay together and maximise their time together. Work programme 7 was about being deaf, and that's BSL, so no verbal language, but an embodied visual language, and what that is like to live with dementia, and what does that mean to be in a neighbourhood. And finally, we had a wellbeing service for anybody who took part in the study, including staff. We worked very closely with 4 well-known groups. I'd like to think through Educate, Open Doors, Scottish Dementia Working Group, and we set up a new group for people with dementia in Salford called Salford Inspire, which was run by Joy Watson. We encouraged people with dementia in Work Programme 1 to do their own research and be involved in as many of the other work programmes as possible. The work was done in the UK and in Sweden through the Centre for Dementia Research. We had about 45 staff working on the project and 4 PhD students. And other than Work Programme 7, all the work programmes were led by mid-career researchers to develop capacity for the future. So I'm going to take you through now some of the highlights of what we actually found in our 5 years together. The member involvement, again, taking what Dianne said, is really important. It took us about 3 years to develop for people with dementia, and the logos at the top are those who took part in this research and who published this research alongside us. But this was about developing a way of thinking and being and understanding what people with dementia wanted in research. And it was just everything, basically, from being involved in setting the question through to dissemination. And what we found at the very beginning was that training and support was vital. Without ongoing training and support, sometimes those bridges would collapse. So keeping that central to a philosophy and a training scheme for people with dementia was crucial. And we also had to adapt the language of research. This is an example, a typical example from the project. This is Caroline on the left of the screen, members of the Open Doors Research Group. And in the middle, leaning over the map, is Leslie Calvert. And one of the battles we had as research team was that people with dementia were co-researchers, not participants, but they were seen to be co-researchers. So they were part of the ethics approval process, and they had the status of co-researchers. So, and wanted, if they wanted to use their own name, just like I'm sharing my own name now. And these were not small battles, these were quite big ones, but they were important for us as we went along this road together. From a very big project to a very small outcome, this is work by Leslie Calvert, the person I just showed you in the previous slide. Leslie lived with dementia for a number of years, and she was basically interested in doing a project about her own life growing up in Salford. And Regent Road is a very well-known road in Salford. She'd take you through the diagram. It goes from the 1950s, where it's a black and white photograph, to the 1970s, where it's still a thoroughfare, but it's still basically a street. And in 2015, it's now a major throughway into and out of Manchester. So the whole neighbourhood is basically gone. And what she was describing was something to do with place attachment disruption. That's what she wrote. That's what we helped and supported her to write. And that was her publication and her contribution. This is not the most exciting slide I'll ever share with you in my life. But if you have a look at any of the films here, 3 of them are on YouTube. One of them was through the ITN. The very bottom one was basically people with dementia coming together to do an animation to explain and explore their neighbourhood life and living. And again, animation and the creative outputs of people with dementia were really important. So animation, we found, was a really useful way of doing that. On the second bullet point down, there was a animation done by people with dementia about stigma and how to overcome stigma. But the very bottom one is a really interesting 15-minute animation, should you wish to have a look at it. I really hope you do. Nowhere does it mention dementia in any of the presentation until the very end. And I think that was a really important statement, that people with dementia didn't always want to talk about dementia. And again, not everybody with dementia has access to the internet, so we had to find different ways of accessing and supporting and disseminating our work. And we had Tony's husband as part of the work in Lancaster. That's through his cartoon work. But we had some very creative ways and what would be called old school ways now of using newsletters and other ways of getting the messages across. Work Programme 2 was about generating neighbourhood profiles. So is there a risk, basically, if you go to an area, you'd be more exposed to dementia or the risk of acquiring a dementia? The very short answer to that is no. It's not where you live that matters, but how you live. And what we found after doing about 3 years worth of work is that there are protective characteristics in dementia, such as education, social connections, internet use, and moderate to vigorous exercise. So those were the things that were really mattered in health promotion and health education. But it's really how you take care of yourself in your life that truly matters most. In Work Programme 3, led by Siobhan Riley at Lancaster University, we developed a core outcome set. And if I can say that, it's really to help guide future clinical trials, because we wanted to involve people with dementia. This work took us about 4 years to really tell us what matters most in your everyday life at home. What is it? What should we be looking to measure? So we had to develop, there was about 300 and odd stakeholders involved in this. We used Delphi techniques with people with dementia, probably for the very first time. The statements are very positive. They were all sculpted by people with dementia. And really, of the 13 statements, the top one about good relationships is hugely important. But also there's statement 8, which is about knowing where you are, which again, people with dementia found really important, but very much overlooked in outcome measures that were to do with their lives. We did a follow-up paper that was published in the Gerontologist just a couple of months ago. And basically we looked at 76 outcome measures of well-known outcome measures. And of those 13 statements that seemed to be important by people with dementia, the most we found in any of the outcome measures was 7 statements. So, and that was by the IEDQ by Stoner et al. In 2018. That plus the Ascot tool was covered 9 of the 13 core outcome statements. So again, this is about doing psychosocial work in the community with people with dementia, telling us what matters most. And this is just a copy of the paper. That's the shortlist. We published the long list, but this is the shortlist that really matters. In work program 4, we looked at neighbourhoods and how and basically the everyday interactions. This work was done in Stirling, in Greater Manchester in Sweden. It won some awards from its PPI work, but we wanted to shift the narrative. The narrative is shifted around the lived neighbourhood. So in relational places and points of connection, people with dementia getting out and about and becoming familiar strangers, or being able to name familiar strangers. Issues around communities of place. And the interesting thing about this work, I think, seeing it from a neighbourhood perspective, is that the home became really important. So your home in your neighbourhood was a really important sense of security and belonging. And again, shifting the emphasis to everyday life and to small acts of kindness that were produced not only by people with dementia, but also by localities, those very small connections that just kept human life going. And again, the outputs are very creative in how that was communicated back to the field, including through zines. This work is in German hospitals. It would probably take a whole day to talk through these slides, so I'm not going to do that. But we looked at about 5.5 million hospital records over those dates in 2010, 12 and 16, with 900,000 admissions, people with dementia. And we looked at what are the points of contrast. So people with dementia coming into hospital tends to be older, to have previous emergency admissions, be more clinically complex, be admitted for different kinds of conditions, be discharged to a care home from being in hospital, be 30% more likely to die in hospital, and they'd stay on average about 1 day longer. And I think one of the take-home messages for ourselves is that palliative and end-of-life care in German hospitals and moving the home into the hospital could be something that might be very helpful as we think about palliative approaches and end-of-life approaches going forward. This was work run by Ingrid Hellstrom, and it was about Dempower. So this is the name of the app. It was very empowering, looking at positive versions of health. And basically the Dempower app focused on what people or couples can still do together, their relationship, everyday life. And the archives were the app was able to archive reflections, meaningful moments and memories. It was over 4 headings, which are there. It was translated then into an app which was given on an iPad, and people with dementia and couples could use it to structure their everyday life. And in the pilot trial, it basically saw a growth in their relationship, shared feelings of not being alone, and it instilled a positive approach by living in the moment. So again, I think it was a successful pilot trial, but further work is still needed. In work program 7, we worked with life story work with the deaf community. And Emma Ferguson-Coleman spoke at last year's Alzheimer Europe conference. And myself and Elis Young supervised her PhD, and she's the only deaf signer, I think, in the world with an interest in dementia. But what this work was about was really reorientating the culture of the deaf community to dementia. And whilst we might understand about what is reminiscence of life story work, in the deaf community that just wasn't done. There was just no resources. So this was about starting a new culture, and I can't take any credit for that. Emma can. But also what was really interesting from the deaf community, neighbourhoods were seen as virtual places. So a neighbourhood could almost be an international community, which again extends from Tim Blackman's work into new ways of thinking. And our wellbeing service, it's difficult to share this because it was a confidential service, but of 45 members of staff, a third of the staff actually received wellbeing support over the length of the project. And just like Tom Kitwood said in the 1990s, you've got to look after your staff if you're going to look after people with dementia. And the same is true, I think, in research. You must look after your researchers to do high quality research. All our PhD students are completed. I was involved in the supervision of Katie and Therese, but the PhD students have now gone on from our program to develop their own programs of research and work, which is just wonderful. I'd like to have a special thank you to the chair of our scientific advisory committee, which was Tom Scharf, to Agnes Houston and her daughter Donna, to Jean, Mira and Christine for just being wonderful supports over the 5.5 years. And this very final slide is basically just, I discussed this with Andrew Clark just before a couple of weeks ago, and we were just looking at some of the key messages basically for the neighbourhood study. So our idea is going forward from all this work is to think creatively about how we might understand what neighbourhoods mean to people with dementia. Yeah. So neighbourhoods are social as well as physical places. It's really important, the social points of connection. Mundane activities matter, so that's just everyday life. People with dementia contribute towards the neighbourhood in often unnoticed ways. Remain conscious of change, and if anything's done this year, we have to remain very conscious of change and how services and neighbourhoods are reconfigured. And neighbourhoods include home, and it's where we all live. And there is so little research done still on home, and I'll tell you where there's very little research is on the outsides of home, in the gardens and the outdoor spaces of the home. There's so little to that. All right. My final slide is just some of our references. It's not all of them, but it's some of them from the study that might be of value.
Yes.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, John KEADY. Life lessons in there as well. Small acts of kindness, living in the moment, feeling able to keep your identity. That's a startling one if you consider Alzheimer and the condition. I was surprised that you said, well, in the short version, I know you said, well, it doesn't matter where you live, it's how you live. But I've always understood that, especially considering health, it matters where you live because that decides on how well you're able to live, poverty and opportunities and things like that. What do you think?
I think that's a lovely question. It's the gerontologists who did that work basically put the social deprivation of index measure within the ELSA, but there was no correlation. So again, I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah. I understand that. It is about health and about the meaning of health. Yeah. And maybe as we go forward, we probably need to understand that better. It's not that I'm not going to say this is a definitive answer. It's just basically what we found.
It's what we found. It's very interesting to know and see what happens when prevention starts on lifestyle more, etc. Well, we have lots to discuss. I want to invite the other guests with you so we can talk about the questions that came in, and we want to provide a poll, of course, also. Maybe we can, maybe this was not smart of me, Jean, because maybe you can elaborate a little on the poll that you just presented to everyone. Which of the described initiative would be a particular importance in your country?
So basically the idea behind this poll was that John presented some really interesting work. And one of the ideas behind all our conferences, of course, is that there's so many good things happening. Why not learn from those and try to implement them in your own countries? Yep. So if you had to choose one of the 8 issues that he just presented, which one would be the one that you would want to see in your country the most? And we already have almost 100 people that responded to that. And he will see that. So this is
research is the highest score. Yes, because
no surprise listening to the kind of 2 speakers that we had before. Dianne talked about participatory research.
They did.
28%. Hospital care is something that received 25%. Yeah. And then neighborhood-specific prevalence and core outcomes for people with dementia, both at 14%. Issues that were less of interest was the life story work with deaf people, the couples work, and also the staff well-being work that you presented. But I think I really wanted to congratulate John on the fantastic work that you've done.
Yes.
But are you surprised by what the priorities would be for other countries to implement the work that you have done?
I'm both surprised but delighted to have that appraisal. I think I thought maybe the core outcome set might be there, but no, I respect and honour everybody's opinions. It was just a pleasure to be able to do the work.
Yeah.
And of course, people with dementia also paid on our projects as well. So I think that was an important marker. It's what the lovely thing about the Prime Minister's Challenge could do, is that we could actually reward people for taking part.
Thank you so much. So now you're all back here, so we can answer a few of your questions. But before Jean picks a question to ask you, I want to know that there are some very important comments, like the skies are blue in Glasgow. Thank you. Really love to know that. And somebody says we have too many tourists. Might be somebody from Amsterdam or maybe from Venice, or do you have? Because I think that some people now long for the tourists to return in Amsterdam also. This is important. And there was somebody stating that if we want to truly value people and their contribution and skills, we should pay people for what they do and for their work. And I was thinking, Jean, maybe we could start the discussion about how to involve people. Also in policy planning, because maybe we should start paying people for sharing their experience. What do you think?
I think that's also something that could be a very good question to Dianne, because in the work that she has done, which is all around involving people in research and organizing patient engagement in some of these kind of projects, there was also discussion within the group on what they were thinking of that approach. And maybe Dianne, you can
comment
that question.
You have to put your microphone on, Dianne. We cannot hear you yet. Yes, it always happens. We all do this. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think that with regard to payment involvement in public involvement, that it's a little bit of a personal issue in that some people, there's a very split opinions on it. Some people are in favour of payment and other people's aren't. For some aren't. For a lot of people, the public involvement has evolved as a kind of a voluntary engagement, as a means to contribute towards society, and it's not envisaged as a paid engagement. And sometimes it can also be problematic for people who want to contribute voluntarily. If there's payment involved, it can be very difficult for with taxation and things like that. And one of the suggestions that we sometimes encounter is that people would like to receive some kind of a gift or a recognition for their work. In some organisations, people receive gift vouchers and things like that. And one of the suggestions has been that people would like to donate a certain amount for their participation to a charitable works.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so then it's well-used money again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me see. Sabine, we had a comment here, and I don't know if you recognize this. In the UK, we have a dementia-friendly hospital charter. Heard about that?
No, we don't have it in Germany yet.
No.
But I think it's a good thing.
Some kind of rating, or you don't work with that yet?
No.
Okay.
Not yet, but I think it's more important to live a charter. So you always have. It's also the same with national dementia plans. You have to work on the implementation of things and not to leave it with words.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good thing anyway.
If it helps, yes. Okay. Jean, do you have another question you want to?
Yeah, I also saw a very interesting question for Jacqueline, because I think she presented projects like Demenz Talent and so on. And one of the questions is, how were these activities impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic? And how do you make sure that people are not regressing? Was another question, again linked to the kind of stopping of some of these projects and services.
Yes, thank you. Well, a part of the activities had to stop due to COVID problems as well. Luckily in the Netherlands, we didn't have a complete lockdown. So as soon as most measures were really relaxed again, so a number of people in Dementia-Land projects were able to start their work again. That's, but now we're having a second wave of COVID and there are more restrictions. So now people are struggling again to do their work, but they're trying to do it. But it's most certainly affected by COVID, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course
as
it
we
is.
all are.
Yes, of course it is. So, Jean, what do you want to ask John?
There's actually a question that I think spans the work between what Dianne presented and what you're working on. And it's the question around what's the role of ethics committees in allowing research. And one of the questions is, aren't ethics committees sometimes too protective of people with dementia and trying to stop research being carried out, although people with dementia would have been very happy to take part? And maybe from your experience, is that something that you've seen as well? And would you agree with that?
And may I add to that that we have a response of somebody saying, yes, that is the case, because it takes a long, long time to start things because the ethic committees are too slow. What do you think, John?
My personal perspective is absolutely, we've seen this throughout, I think throughout the last 15 or 20 years of trying to do research with people with dementia. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're mean to do it. I think it's just something that just happens. It's almost like it's almost overly protective and moving people from a participant to a co-research role through in the UK or in England, Wales under the Mental Capacity Act legislation is really difficult. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. But we need a new ethics. We need a new value-based ethics, which is truly about people with dementia having the right to know, to be represented as to who they are, to keep their identity. Yeah. It would be interesting if all of us today were under a pseudonym and we couldn't really say who we were. And I think there's a really important human rights marker here about being and retaining your identity if you want to keep it. And I think not having the choice is fairly miserable. Yeah. But we did fight really hard on the neighbourhood study, and Caroline Swarbrick in Lancaster was just fantastic. I mean, a real pioneer. But we know we've had bad experiences. We had really difficult experiences.
Yes, you did.
One of our PhD students on the list of 4 got their PhD turned down at ethics because, it's not really research, is it? Oh, so we tried to do a cooperative inquiry alongside people with dementia to be co-researchers, to actually have an empowering methodology such as cooperative inquiry, to take that forward. But then you might have an opinion that maybe it's not research.
That's a bad experience, yes.
It's about that value-based ethics. I think we need to think about that in an embodied code and in a value-based ethics. I think
yes, because protectiveness is a good thing, but this is overprotective or conservative, maybe even, right? Thank you so much. Jean, what would you like to ask our guests, our speakers, for the final questions?
I think most of the questions have already been answered because I see that
the ethics committee was a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes, is everything answered? So then it's up to you,
the looks
Jean.
of it, yeah.
Yeah, then it's up to you. What do you want to say to them?
No, I think it was really brilliant, presentation. What I found interesting is that I'm really proud of some of the achievements that all of you have been able to talk about. It's like we have made incredible strides when it comes to involving people in research. We have done so much on making our society more dementia friendly. There's really good initiatives when it comes to making hospitals more dementia inclusive. And then the fantastic work that you have done, John, on 8 different areas all around improving the lives of people with dementia in the neighborhood. I think all of that is fantastic, but then it's really sobering to hear that over 60% of people have not ever even heard of dementia-friendly initiatives, that ethics committees still do not understand some of the kind of basics around that, and that unfortunately dementia-inclusive hospitals is the exception rather than the rule. So I think we should be proud of what we've done, but there's still an awful lot to be done in the future.
Yes, it's a bit alarming, but we are awake. Okay, John is applauding. Thank you. Still lots of work to do, but these people are working on it. So we thank you so very much, panel. And we will meet again in the future, probably, and hopefully in the flesh, live, all together. Bye now. Thank you so much. And I'll stay here with Jean. Right? Yeah, there we are. Okay, Jean, this is not quite the ending of day 2, because at 5:30 there will be 2 special sessions, right? One is about COVID in dementia in this time. And the other one?
The other one is organized by the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, and it's really talking about, are we ready as societies for the advent of new treatments that are hopefully coming down the road. So 2 very interesting sessions that I hope you will still be able to attend.
Attend, yes. And maybe while they're having a little bit of dinner, doesn't matter. That's the good part of being online. You can lie in your bed and take your laptop or whatever. Doesn't matter.
Watch with your cat or dog as well.
Cats or dogs are a requirement there. Yeah, what do you do when you don't have a pet?
I'm sure there's other ways of watching programs. I have to say, I definitely enjoyed watching television when we had cats, and today we don't have cats, but it's still very enjoyable.
Yes, and so please keep tweeting on Twitter, and we will read everything. And then we will return tomorrow morning at 8:45 again. We have another interesting session, from research and innovation to clinical and care practice, right? Which is always a big and major step. Okay, now you can say good. Oh no, we thank all the sponsors, we thank all the participants, and we thank all our speakers. And now you can say bye, right?
Bye-bye, and see you. Enjoy the next sessions, and see you tomorrow.
I see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow here in Amsterdam.